कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा वरदारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शील प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शील प्रभुपदा एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रभु सदा श्री श्रीमती स्वयं श्री श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन संस्थापक श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रभु सदा श्री श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद लखोट किशोर दास महाराज की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद से भक्ति ठाकुरा की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सर्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप भट्टर श्री जी के गोपाल भट्टदास गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य दास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से गो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोकुल श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड त्रिगोतन की जय। श्री श्री गौरांगी बंडोरीश्वर भगवान की जय। श्री मायपुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगामयी की जय। यमुना की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। श्री हरनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद भागवतम की जय। इस्कॉन वर्तमान गुरुवंद की जय। समावित भक्ति की गौर प्रेमानंद all glories to the assembly. All glories to the assembly. All glories to the assembly. All glories to Shikura and Shikar and all goes to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Divim Saraswati Vyasam. Tato Jayamudire Nashta Prayeshu Apatreshu Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Sloke. Bhakti Bhavati Naishtihi. करोति वाचालं संगं कृपातमहं वन्दे शीघ्रं दिनतारिणीं परमानन्दमाधवं श्री चैतन्य ईश्वरम्। Hare Krishna. So welcome you all to this Saturday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. We are today discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 10, Text 16 to Text 30. But I will just, as an introductory subject, I will take Text 16 so that they are connected to all the references in the subject matter. So this chapter entitled Divisions of Creation, from the text 15 onwards, it explains as to how there are different kinds of creations and different sub-creations also. So in the text 15, it's just said that of the 9 creations, the first one is the creation of the Mahatattva, or the sum total of the material ingredients, wherein the modes interact due to the presence of the Supreme Lord. In the second, the false ego is generated, in which the material ingredients, material knowledge, and material activities arise. I'll give a small explanation on this before we proceed to the slokas and today's subject. So, the first one is the Mahatattva. The first material creation that takes place in this manifestation is Pradhan. Pradhan is the unmanifested state, wherein the elements are there, the material modes are there, but then they are all undifferentiated. So from Pradhan, then the first creation happens, that is a Mahat Tattva, which is the sum total of all the material ingredients, but the modes here interact due to the presence of the Supreme Lord. That means when the Lord as Mahavishnu glances, then the modes start interacting. That is Mahat Tattva. And in the second level of creation, the false ego is generated, in which the material ingredients, material knowledge, and material activities arise. So this is the stage, the false ego, at which the soul identifies with the mind, and when it mixes with the 3 modes of material nature, the living entities identify with the wishes to enjoy out of the due to the false ego. So false ego, when it is mixed with goodness, produces the mind. The false ego mixed with passion produces the material intelligence, and false ego mixed with ignorance produces the 5 gross elements. So also there is a mention as to how from the 3 modes of material natures, from goodness comes knowledge, from passion comes activity, and from ignorance comes destructions. So knowledge also indicates the Jnanendriyas and the controlling deities. The work indicates the Karmendriyas and the controlling deities. And also, this Ahankar or the false ego is the one that makes one to think that I am the controller. That comes, the false ego also can be classified into 3: goodness, passion, and ignorance, sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. The sattvic ahankar makes one think that I am the controller. The rajasic ahankar makes one think that I am the enjoyer. And the tamasic ahankar makes one think that I am the proprietor. So in this way, the false ego, through its various classifications, goodness, passion, ignorance, makes a living entity think in various angles. Now we will go towards the text for today, that is from 16 to 30. Text 16 says the sense perceptions are created in the third creation, and from these the elements are generated. And the fourth creation is the creation of knowledge and of working capacity. So the sense perception or the objects of the senses. The sense objects are smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. And the tanmatras and the power to produce are also created in the third creation. Now the elements, gross elements are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So the five gross elements and their properties are also given. For example, in ether, we find sound, but you cannot touch anything. We can only hear. Then air, in which we have the sound, and with this sense, such as touch, we can feel air passing by when it is passes by. In fire, we have sound, the sense of touch, and even it has the sense of form. We can see the form of fire. And then next is water, in which we have all the above. And also on top of that, we also have the taste. That means water has got a taste. When we taste water, we sometimes feel the water is good, water is not good. So in that, the taste is also there. And finally, earth has all the four, but also it has got something called fragrance. So many times when we walk through a very healthily created place, you might find where a lot of trees are there, nice, attractive, beautiful, flowery plants are there. They have a lot of fragrance. So earth has got all the above, but also it is what is called fragrance. So this is how the third creations takes place. From the fourth creation, the creation of knowledge and of working capacity. The jnanendriyas, or the senses for acquiring, and the karmendriyas, or the working senses, that are voice, hands, legs, anus, and genitals. So these are the working senses and the knowledge acquiring senses. These are created in the third and in the fourth creation. The sensor objects are also created, and these sense objects are so strong that it can drive away a man of intelligence also. As the Lord states in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 262 to Arjuna, he says, while contemplating the sense objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. So there is an example given as to how Lord Shiva was deep in meditation, but when Parvati agitated him for sense pleasure, he agreed to the proposal, and as a result, Kartikeya was born. But on the other hand, we see that when Srila Haridas Thakura, he was a very young devotee of the Lord, he was also similarly allured by the incarnation of Maya Devi herself. But Haridas Thakura easily passed the test because of his unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna. So another example given is that as to how Srila Yamunacharya, a very sincere devotee of the Lord, he says he shuns all the material enjoyment due to the higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in association with the Lord. So these sense objects are so very powerful that it can drive even a person with a lot of intelligence and very high degree of understanding. It can drive him also to be made attracted to the sense objects. Now, text number 17, it says the fifth creation is that of the controlling deities by the interaction of the mode of goodness, of which mind is the sum total. The sixth creation is the ignorant darkness of the living entity by which the master acts as a fool. So, in this fifth creation, in the demigods, the higher planets are called devas, uh, or we normally call them demigods, and they are all devotees of Lord Vishnu. Whereas the other type of living entities are called the asuras. Normally, these demigods are situated in the modes of passion, in the modes of goodness, whereas the other asuras or the demons are situated in the modes of passion and ignorance. So these demigods are controlling deities. They are all interested with departmental management of all. So many functions are there in the material world. We might think that everything happens automatically, but there is nothing that happens automatically. There is a demigod who is in charge of each and every function in this material world. An example is given as to how our eye is controlled by our uh, sense of seeing is controlled by light, and the controlling deity is, and this light is coming from sun rays, and we are able to see because we are getting sunlight, and this controlling deity is the sun itself. Similarly, mind is controlled by the moon. Many times we find that our mind is very, very strongly agitated. So it is said that on certain days, when the moon agitates, our mind is very strongly agitated. So mind is controlled by the moon. Similarly, all the senses, whether working senses or knowledge acquiring senses, are controlled by various demigods. And these demigods are all devotees of the Lord, and they are assisting the Lord in the management of the material affairs. They are not independent of the Lord, they are all dependent on the Lord, just like we living entities. But they are situated on a higher platform, and being devotees of the Lord, they are given these higher services for them to assist the Lord. So after this creation of the demigods, the living entities are covered by the darkness of ignorance. So each and every living being is in the material world is conditioned, like I mentioned, the beginning of the Lord, to lord it over the material nature and to claim proprietorship of this material nature, which I mentioned at the beginning of the class. So although a living entity in is a master in this world, is conditioned by ignorance, by the false impression of thinking that I am the proprietor of all the material things that I see. There is a general tendency to think that whatever I see is mine, or everything belongs to me, my family, my society, and finally it comes to my country also. This I and mine is uh, a general tendency that comes out of false ego, and all the living entities are conditioned by this false impression. So there is a energy of the Lord called avidya, and this avidya acts as a bewildering potency of the Lord for the conditioned soul. Now, this material nature itself is called avidya or ignorance, but for the devotees of the Lord who are engaged in devotional service to the Lord, it turns as vidya or pure knowledge. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Now, there are two forms of Maya, for example, Mahamaya and Yoga Maya. Now, the energy of the Lord transforms from Mahamaya to Yogamaya and appears to pure devotees in her real feature. But the same Maya in material nature, it appears in three phases. It functions in three phases as the creative principle of the material world, as ignorance, as material world, ignorance, and as knowledge also. We'll go into a little bit of this. Now, first, the conditioned souls are actually not originally fools, but by this conditioning of the avidya potency of this material of the Lord, they are made as fools, and that they are unable to utilize the knowledge that is there in the proper channel. Knowledge is there, that is vidya, and ignorance is there, that is avidya. But what happens is, by this influence of darkness, the conditioned souls forget the relationship with the Lord and is overwhelmed by attachment. There are five things that are there. One is attachment, one is hatred, one is pride, one is ignorance, and one is false identification. These are the five kinds of illusion that causes material bondage for all the living entities. Now, if you see the first one, that is attachment. in this material world, we'll see that each and every living entity, if you look at even our own selves, we have developed attachment to someone or something in this material world. Something will always be there. And as long as we have this attachment, we will always be bound in this material world. Then the next is hatred. In the course of our interaction with elements or other living entities, we also develop what is called hatred for something, or someone might not like something that is bitter. Someone might not like a particular person. So that is a hatred. This is one kind of illusion. And if you see, there is a quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. He says that all the living entities, they are all creations by the Supreme Lord Himself. Sometimes you might develop a hatred for a lizard. But then if you see the quote by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, one cannot develop a hatred for these living entities because they are all creations of the Lord Himself. Whatever it may be, due to their karma, they have got that form of body. But then they are all creations of the Lord Himself. The third type of illusion is called pride. As we see, we all have a tendency to develop some pride in the course of our activities in this material world. And this also tends to develop when we perform devotion service also. That is how powerful this pride is. Then ignorance, we are all definitely ignorant as we see ourselves. When we start coming to the practice of devotional service, we might have realized that, yes, before coming to this platform of performing, we were so ignorant of what the real truth is. Who am I? What am I? So forth. But then somehow, by mercy of the Lord, we come across devotees and try to understand what is the real truth. We are not this body, we are servants of the Lord, etc. And the last is false identification, which is also, I mentioned the beginning of the class. These are 5 kinds of illusion that causes the material bondage for every living entity in this material world. Now, the demigods, by the interaction, also interact in the 3 modes, that is, the mode of goodness. Predominantly, they are in the mode of goodness, but they also interact sometimes in the mode of passion and mode of ignorance also. That is why they are not pure devotees of the Lord, and that's why they are there in this material world also. Now, with the interaction of these 3 put together, the mind is the sum total, which is why it is said that in the 4th creation, mind is the sum total of all the controlling deities. Then the 6th creation, there is one more point. I'll come to that a little later. The 6th creation is the ignorant darkness of the living entity by which the master acts as a fool. So the asuras are or the demons are normally situated in the mode of passion or ignorance. So after the creation of the demigods, all the entities are covered by the darkness of ignorance. Now, this degree of ignorance may vary from person to person. But what happens is that this avidya, the potency of the Lord, covers a living entity to the extent that he is situated. For example, if a living entity is in the mode of ignorance, he is covered to a greater extent. But if somebody is in the mode of passion, it may be to a lesser extent. So to the extent that a person is situated in one of these 3 modes, this avidya potency covers that particular person. Few examples are given in terms of differentiating between this vidya and avidya. Vidya is compared to a light. Supposing when one is in front of the sun, he is able to clearly see everything in broad daylight. So that is vidya. Whereas avidya is compared to a darkness or a shadow. That means when one is away from the sun, one is not able to see very clearly. I mean, it's not that we may not, our vision is totally covered, but when one sees during sunlight, his vision is much more clearer than when one sees in the moonlight, where sometimes our vision might be blurred. This is the difference between this vidya and avidya. Similarly, trying to see Lord is called vidya, and actually it's a sort of an illumination for a living entity. Whereas trying to be away or trying to see our relationship as away from the Lord, that is called avidya. So also in Vidya, we see everything in relationship to the Lord. A person in knowledge, he understands that whatever is there in this material manifestation, everything is a creation by the Lord Himself. And there is nothing away from the Lord, nothing different from the Lord. That is called Vidya. Whereas seeing everything in relationship to Maya is called Avidya. Similarly, hearing about the Lord from scriptures from a devotee is called Vidya, whereas aversion to hearing, aversion to reading the scriptures, these are called Avidya. So this material nature itself is created in such a way that it covers the living entity by ignorance, whereas whereby the soul forgets his relationship with the Lord and he thinks himself to be the Lord. Also, there is an example that is given in Srimad Bhagavatam itself, how there are five coverings of ignorance. The first is called tamisra or anger. Because of the minute independence of the living entity, he thinks, why I can't enjoy like the Lord Himself? And this creates in every living entity some sort of an envy and anger. This tamisra does not leave a living entity even while practicing devotional service. Many times we might see that we might be chanting or we might be doing some devotional service, and sometimes we may tend to develop some envy to other devotees also. This is one type of ignorance. The second one of ignorance is called Andattamisra, which makes one think that death is the ultimate end. Many times we see that people say, after all, I'm going to die someday. As long as I'm living, let me enjoy life to the maximum possible extent. This is the second type of ignorance. The third type of ignorance is called tamas, that is not knowing about the soul. Ultimately, we are the spirit soul. This body is also functioning because of the presence of spirit soul. Otherwise, this body has no value. The fourth one is called moha, illusion, by which one thinks that the body is all in all. And by so guided by this illusion, one is guided by sex life and becomes attached to home, family, children, land, etc. And thinks that everything belongs to me. The society is mine, this land is mine, this country is mine. Many times people say, I'm an Indian, I'm so European. So this is the fourth type of ignorance. And the fifth type of ignorance is called Mahamoha, whereby living entities run after material enjoyment and accumulate paraphernalia for material enjoyment. So we see that people work hard, very hard day and night. Even if they have enough uh, opulence, still they want to continue to work hard. They think that they can enjoy with it, which is also an illusion. This way, there are five kinds of illusions, and they keep us bound in this material world. Now, there is also a mention as to how these elements are required for creation of this material manifestation. Now, when we make any let me give an example of a product of a commodity that, for example, if we make some vegetable, so many things are required. Vegetable is required, a knife is required to cut the vegetable, spices are required, a vessel is required, a spoon is required, heat is required, and then ultimately someone has to cook. So this way, all the elements are material elements are required, and then they are all assembled together to make this material manifestation. Otherwise, this body cannot be complete unless and until all the parts are assembled. So this is how our body is assembled. Another example that is given is that for a car that is assembled in a factory. Now, so many parts go into the manufacture of a car, but ultimately, if there is no driver, that car has no value. So without a driver, car value is zero. A driver may now also a driver may sit in a small car, but that small car has got a limited power also. Whereas a driver in a big sedan or a luxury car may have more power. So sometimes even if a driver is very expert in driving the car, his performance will be limited to the type of car in which he sits. Similarly, the body that we see that we have is composed of these 24 elements, and these 24, in fact, some research are mentioned as 28. I just shortly described before we go to the next. The reason is that we must understand the importance of this creation, how this creation takes place, why it takes place. It's not that we see that this body starts automatically. There is a big science behind creation of everything in this material world. So these 9 elements, it is there. 28 elements are classified to 9, 11, 5, and 3. The 9 elements are material nature, which we discussed: living entity, Mahatattva, false ego, plus 5 objects of sense perception, that is sound, touch, form, taste, and aroma. Then 11 elements, of which 5 are working senses, that is voice, hands, legs, anus, and genitals, plus 5 knowledge acquiring senses, that is ears, eyes, touch, tongue, and nostrils. And the coordinative sense, that is the mind. It is the mind that coordinates one sense to the other. Then the 5 gross elements which we discussed, that is earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Then the 3 modes of material nature, and lastly the super soul. That is, with the assembly of all these elements, we see a material body, or whatever we think this material body is manifested. So it is not that body manifests on its own. Now, we come to sloka number 18. I went through this sloka a little bit in detail so that we can understand the importance. In sloka 18, it said, all the above are natural creations by the external energy of the Lord. Now, hear from me about the creations by Brahma, who is an incarnation of the mode of passion, and who, in the matter of creation, has a brain like that of the personality of Godhead. Now, as we have heard before, the Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and for this material manifestation, He creates Brahma, who is the first living entity in this material world. He maintains this material world through as Vishnu, and finally he annihilates on periodic annihilation, which was mentioned in the previous verses by the previous speaker, through Lord Shiva. So Brahma is a secondary creator. Now, as I mentioned in the previous sloka, Lord creates the basic elements, like so many elements, like gross subtle elements like mind, intelligence, the senses, then he also the mind. So all these assembled together, Brahma makes use of them, and he gives different shape to different living entities depending on their karma, their activities, their desire, and so many things are concerned. That is also a science. We'll go through this in each of these lokas to the extent possible. And this secondary creation, now the first creation which the Lord creates is called Sarga, and the secondary creation made by Brahma is called Visarga. Now, Brahma is not a normal living entity like us. Of course, he is also a demigod, but he is the first creation in this material world. And it is said that he has got a brain like that of personality of Godhead. Still, he is different from personality of Godhead. He is not God, but he is created. There are so many Brahmas in so many universes. Now, these creations are Brahma, Brahma is also a creation incarnation in the mode of passion. So we discussed about 3 modes, that is goodness. There are 3 modes, which is goodness, passion, and ignorance. It requires a certain amount of passion to create. So Brahma is always situated in the mode of passion, and it is due to that he is able to create. And in that matter of creation, it requires a lot of brain. And it is said that Brahma has got a brain like that of the personality of Godhead. And he's the first boy, jiva of this universe. And he's a jiva like us, but he's very, very special. He's called Swayambhu. That is, he's self-born. He's not born out of union between a material, like a material father and mother. He's self-born. He is very close to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he has not achieved that position of Brahma simply as it is, but he has performed a lot of austerity by which he has got that post. Now it is mentioned Brihad Bhagavatamrita as to how one who has absorbed all the samskaras, there are so many samskaras in our life, one who has observed all the samskaras for 100 births can achieve the position of Brahma. So Brahma uses his intelligence fully for the service of the Lord. Now we might think, what is the difference between us and Brahma? Brahma uses everything in the service of the Lord, whereas we might think that I can use everything for my own sense gratification. This is the difference. But still, sometimes the Lord, to perform his pastimes, he puts the Lord Brahma also into ignorance. Now, it is not that the Lord creates and leaves them as it is. He creates a perfect creation. The Lord has a root for a perfect creation. It is maintained properly, and at the right time, they are also annihilated through Lord Shiva. Now, Brahma was also the first speaker of the Vedas. Now, these Vedas are eternal and sound emanations from the Lord. And as we see, there are so many things that we see, all the signs that we see, all the descriptions that we see in this material world, they are all there present in the form of, in the Vedas themselves, including plans for various forms of life. There are so many quotes from different Puranas and Upanishads and everywhere. And these Vedas are very, very greatly organized, and they cannot be changed by anyone's whims and fancies. And only originally these Vedas emanated from the Supreme Lord himself. Another example given is that, like in a building, there is a lot of construction that is required. So when the building is constructed, afterwards interior decorations are required. So Brahma does something like that. So Vedas are to be heard and not just read from manuscripts. Of course, people in Kali Yuga are not qualified enough to understand or read the Vedas. But Brahma, in his case, he does such a perfect creation. If he does something wrong, he is accountable to the Lord. So he does not make mistakes. And there are many examples as to given as to how Brahma's creation takes place also. There was a very great musician in the name of Mozart. He could play any music in any instrument from the age of 4 himself. And later, when somebody interviewed him, he claimed that he had got this talent from his previous birth as another musician. That means he realized he was not an Indian, but then see his realization. He said that he was a musician in his previous birth and he had carried this talent from his previous birth. This is the responsibility of Brahma. He actually provides a living entity the right type of birth and the right time in the right way. Similarly, it is said that Ravi Shankar once claimed that he also got his musical talent from his last 11 births. So imagine how creation is so scientific. Srila Prabhupada also quoted once on John Lennon. John Lennon was a very one of the members of the Beatles who were very, very popular in the yesteryears years. So Srila Prabhupada, these Beatles, they came in contact with Srila Prabhupada during their days in the New York city. And Srila Prabhupada quoted, in fact, George Harrison compiled a song on the instructions of Srila Prabhupada, and he compiled a very song called My Sweet Lord. It became very popular those days. So Srila Prabhupada quoted that this John Lennon was a very pious gentleman, and he was staying in Calcutta. But he was very, very favorable to music and donated generously for music. So in his next birth, he became a great musician. So this is how Brahma's creation takes place. And this task, it is said, is not very easy. It is very, very complex task. And it is not that in this universe itself, there are so many planets. And he has got a task of putting these various living entities and placing them in so many planets in one universe itself. And Lord Brahma cannot do this function of creation without the favor of the Lord. Now we go to the next sloka, that is in text 19. It says, the seventh creation is that of the immovable entities, which are of 6 kinds. The fruit trees without flowers, trees and plants which exist until the fruit is ripe, creepers, pipe plants, creepers which have no support, and trees with flowers and fruits. So this creation, about so many different kinds of trees and plants we see. Some are with fruits, some are without fruits. Some are with flowers, some are without flowers. From this, we can understand that all these trees have also got their manifestations in these various forms due to their karma or their desire. Now, there are some fruits which are bitter. There are some fruits which are very sweet. Also, there are creepers. There are pipe plants. Now, have no creepers have no support. They try to take support from another plant. That means they have a particular qualification or they have a particular quality. And there are trees which have both flowers as well as fruits. Now, there was also a quote given by my spiritual master, His Holiness Jayapatak Swami Maharaj. He said in one of his classes as to how a man and a woman, generally the tendency is to enjoy life to the best possible extent. So he quoted in one of his classes that supposing they are traveling in a car, a man and woman are traveling in a car, and at that time they try to enjoy, they try to have sex within themselves, and suddenly an accident takes place. Now, as per Bhagavad Gita, we see that whatever consciousness is there of a living entity at the time of leaving the body, at the time of death, that same consciousness will be there for the next body. So he quoted that when someone tries to have sex at the time and the vehicle meets with an accident, his consciousness at that time is like he wants to enjoy. So next birth they can take if they are naked in the car. Now, there are also examples in the Shastras as to how one who wants to exhibit his body in the naked form, they take birth as trees. These are examples given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So if you try to connect all these examples together, we can realize that there is something called karma, and there is a great intelligence that is applied for these living entities to take bodies in these forms. So that is why one can get a body of a creeper. And my spiritual master mentioned that when two creepers join, they can take shelter of another uh, tree also, and they can be still together because this was their consciousness in their previous life. So there are trees with roots and flowers, and there are trees without any of them. So these are called immovables. Then in text 20, it is mentioned that all the immovable trees and plants seek their subsistence upward. They are almost unconscious but have feelings of pain within. They are manifested in variegatedness, which is what I mentioned. Now, if you see all these trees and plants, their nourishment is upwards. They don't get anything downwards. I'll come to this point a little later. But the trees grow upwards, we see. It is also said that these trees and plants, they also feel pain when they are cut. We may not realize, but they all have consciousness. May not be to a degree that we have, but they all have consciousness. At the same time, there is a lot of variegatedness. That means there are so many varieties. It is also said that these trees and plants can communicate between themselves and they can also smell. Sometimes we see there might be two plants together. So if one plant is obstructing the other in its movement, then automatically we see that their direction changes. That means they can communicate between themselves. And those who are gardeners, those who are into botany and all those things, they know how there is a very science behind it. It is said that they can also see and they can also smell. They can smell and they can also see. That's how they move. It's also mentioned that the plants are very thirsty of water, and when they are deprived of water, they also feel pain. So from this, we understand how trees also have consciousness, and it may be limited, but they are also very, very conscious. And one can get birth as a tree or a plant based on their activities. Then we come to text number 21. Here it is said, the eighth creation is that of the lower species of life, and they are of different varieties, numbering 28. They are all extensively foolish and ignorant. They know their desirables by smell, but are unable to remember anything within the heart. So these lower type of animals, it is mentioned that they have knowledge only of hunger and thirst. They feel hungry, they feel thirsty. Their consciousness is very limited. They have no acquired knowledge and very limited vision they have. Their behavior exhibits no dependence on formalities. They are extremely ignorant and they know their desirables only by smell. So only by smelling they can understand. So some examples are given. We'll come to this. And their knowledge is covered only by eating and sleeping. Therefore, it is said that even the most ferocious animals, such as tigers, can be tamed simply by regularly supplying meals and accommodation for sleeping. So these types of animals, they are mostly into eating and sleeping, eating and sleeping, and eating and sleeping. So a powerful living entity like a tiger can also be tamed by providing them accommodation to sleep and also supplying them meals. It is said that only snakes cannot be tamed by such an arrangement. So lower animals have their knowledge only of hunger and thirst. And these types of living entities, they distribute their nourishment horizontally. That means in the case of trees, they get their nourishment upwards. In the case of animals, they distribute their nourishment horizontally. And there are 28 varieties, and they have no understanding of the future. And the only powerful sense is that sense of smell. So some examples are given. Uh, Many times we might see a human being, his only desire is to create trouble for others. And if it is activity is such, the Lord can give him a birth as a mosquito. Because what does a mosquito do? It simply bites the others. So one who is envious always thinks of how to trouble others. So if his activities are like that of a mosquito, even in a human form of life, he can get a body of a mosquito by which he can start troubling others, because that was his desire. Similarly, if you take human form of life, uh, there are some who live in cold climates, some who live in very hot climates. Uh, People prefer to stay in heat. They are given birth in hot climates. People prefer to stay in winter. So they are given birth in cold climates. Similarly, there are some trees which are grown only in cold climates, and there are some which are grown in hot climates. Some get birth as a street dog, and some get birth as a millionaire's dog. Now, there is one classification that is given that dogs are very loyal uh, uh, animals, whereas it is said that cats are not. The cats, if they want something, they will, as soon as their senses are satisfied, they have no loyalty to the master. But dogs have that loyalty. So all these classifications are there. Then similarly, ants, they run after sweet. Not every animal or every insect runs after sweet, but ants run after sweet. So if we see the nature of each and every living entity, they all have a different quality. In the Shastra, there is also mention as to how there are Chataka birds which would fly and they would be waiting for the first monsoon to come so that they can drink water. And they don't drink water from the ground. So this is their quality. Now we'll go to the next sloka where Maitreya says, O purest Vidura, of the lower animals, the cow, goat, buffalo, Krishna stag, hog, Gavaya animal, deer, lamb, and camel all have two hoofs. So these animals also have classifications. Actually, the Vedic literatures explain as to how uh, these living entities are also one. Some of them, uh, for example, cow. A cow is a symbol of a religious religion. Religion is symbol also by the form of a bull known as dharma. So if we see in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is mentioned as to how a cow and bull are examples of symbols of religion. It is said that the cow is coming from the spiritual world and it is one of the seven mothers for us. There are seven mothers and cow is one of them. One is a real mother, next is a cow, then guru's wife, teacher's wife, king's wife, nurse, and Mother Earth. So cow is a very important animal, although we might consider it as an animal. So by nature's arrangement, when a child is born, he is fed with mother's milk for some time. But thereafter, it is mentioned as to how, until one leaves the body, he is given a cow's milk. So cow's milk is very, very effective. Though cow is classified as an animal, is very important animal in useful for the human form of life. There are similarly other animals which are like horse. During the Esther years, horse used to be one of the popular forms of carriage. There used to be carriages that was run by horse. Horse can run at a speed, whereas a cow cannot run to that speed. There are classifications of animals also. In the next sloka, some are given. The dog, jackal, tiger, fox, cat, rabbit, sajaru, lion, monkey, elephant, tortoise, alligator, gosapa, etc. all have 5 nails in their claws. They are known as panchanakas, or animals having 5 nails. So there are animals which have 5 nails, by which this classification is given. See, these Shastra classifications are very, very also very, very scientific. Now, there is an example as to how lions become very angry when they are agitated. One time, when Srila Prabhupada was there during his time, some devotees took Srila Prabhupada and to a zoo, and one of the devotees agitated the lion, and Srila Prabhupada immediately said, "Never do that." He said that because you are out of the cage, you are trying to do this. Would you have done this if you were in a forest? So lions get agitated very fast. So another important classification that is given is that tigers, they don't eat food unless until they are offered fresh flesh. They don't eat stale meat. These are some classifications. There was also an article where it was mentioned that many times there were in between there was a ban on slaughter of animals and all. So the lions and tigers became weak because they don't eat anything stale, because they have to be given fresh. Another example that is given in the dogs, like uh, we see in the beginning, there's mention of dog. So many different types of dog we see. Some we might see they have a dog. Some have a lot of fur. They have fur in them. Some are very, very aggressive. Some are very silent. So uh, every animal also has got its different qualities. We go to the next one, that is text 25. The heron, vulture, crane, hawk, pasa, baluka, peacock, swan, sarasa, chakravaka, crow, owl, and others are the birds. This is another classification that is given. Here we see that how vultures can see even from a very long distance. Even we human beings don't have that long distance vision like the vultures. Peacock. We all know the importance of peacock. How we see a lot always with peacock and cows. So, in spite of these animals being born, in the spiritual world also, there are animals, but they are all devotees of the Lord. They serve the Lord to the satisfaction of the Lord. So, whatever we see in this material world, they are all reflections. They are living entities like that in the spiritual world also. Then we come to text number 26. Where the creation of the human beings who are of one species only and who stock their eatables in the belly is the ninth in the rotation. In the human race, the mode of passion is very prominent. Humans are always busy in the midst of miserable life, but they think themselves happy in all respects. So this is a very important sloka. We'll understand a little more in this. So the human beings, they are very, very passionate, and they are more prone to attraction to sex life. But some examples are given as to how human beings, though they have got the human form of life, they are not regulated in their living. Whereas some of the animals are highly disciplined. They have their periods for union with the opposite sex, But human being, there is no such time given. But regulations are given the strictures. But the way human being lives is sometimes worse than even animal life. So a human being who misuses his animal form of life can get an animal life in the next birth. Another important point of the human being is that human being is given a higher consciousness for getting relief from the material miseries. But somehow they think that they are always happy in all circumstances. This is the ignorance of in the human form of life. So that is intelligence is misused. That is, when one gets a human form of life, he is supposed to be regulated in his eating, mating, depending, and sleeping. But when he misuses it, he gets the body of an animal instead of getting another human form of life for better purposes, spiritual realization. By advancing in material comforts, a human being is put into more miserable condition. But in spite of that, the illusion power of the Lord is so powerful that a human being thinks that he's always happy in his life. This is the biggest misery that one is in the human form of life. Now, in humans, there are some classifications. Now, we see some are born as white in color, some are born dark in color, which I mentioned in some of the classes. This also happens due to karma. Many are born in countries which are very, very poor. That means it is possible that they might have misused their opulence in their previous life. So they are put into a human form of life in a country where there is no opulence. For example, in the earlier, I don't know how it is now, but the African countries, it is said that people are much more ignorant than the other European countries or Asian countries. So depending on one's karma, one can get a birth in that particular place or the particular complexion. There is another important point that a human form of life, the food is distributed downwards. That means we see that we eat with our mouth, through our mouth, and then food gets digested and comes down. So this is an important classification. Earlier we saw plants were getting their nourishment upwards, animals horizontal, and humans downwards. And they are mostly dedicated to work without which they think that they cannot survive. Generally we see that people want to work. There's no end to their work because they think that that is the only way to survive. There is another important point in the human form of life. It is said that one can get a human birth through different species of life. For example, one can get a human form of life through cow also. Could have been a cow in his previous birth, but next birth he could be a human being. Sometimes we see that there are people who are in the mode of goodness. It is said that they get birth through a cow because cow is an animal in the form of goodness. Then those get also human form of birth due to passion through tiger and bear because their tiger is a very animal in a high degree of passion. And then monkey, one can get a human form of life through a monkey species of life also because monkey is the mode of ignorance. So these are three different classifications through which one can get, that is through goodness, passion, and ignorance, a human form of life. And we see many times that people have these qualities. That's why many times, even in the science, it is said that man has been created from monkeys. So but the human form of life is given to understand the difference between the human and animal forms. Animals are meant have the four common factors, that is eating, mating, and defending and sleeping. But human form of life is given to understand this particular difference and also live accordingly. Yeah. Uh, there is a quote in Srimad Bhagavatam as to how the demigods pray to the Lord. I thought it's a good example. Material body actually resembles a wheel of a mental chariot. We see in a chariot, what are the things that we see in a chariot? So, example is given the 10 senses, that is 5 working and 5 knowledge acquiring. and the five airs within the body, like the prana, apana, and all these things, form the 15 spokes of the chariot wheel. Then the three modes of nature are the center of activities, that is goodness and passion and ignorance, and the 8 ingredients of nature, that is the gross and subtle elements, which comprise the rim of the wheel. The external material energy moves this wheel like an electrical energy. Thus, the wheel revolves very quickly around its hub. So we see that the wheel keeps moving as an animal, as a horse may pull a carriage. Similarly, we see that everything is moving around the hub or the central support. And that central support is none other than the Supreme Godhead, personality of Godhead, who is present as the super soul in every living entity. Now we come to text number 27. Here it is said, "Oh, good Vidura, these last three creations and creation of the demigods, the 10th creation, are Vaikrita creations, which are different from the previously described Prakrita creations, natural creations. The appearance of the Kumaras is both." Now here, uh, it is said that there are many demigods who are existing in the spiritual world also. Now, those demigods are who are pure devotees of the Lord. There also they assist the Lord, but in the material world, the demigods who are there are basically living entities like us who are conditioned, but predominantly they are in the mode of goodness. So, this is the difference between the demigods in the uh, upper spiritual planets and the demigods in the earthly planets. Then coming to text number 28 and 29, it is a little more detailed, the classification is given. It is said that the creation of the demigods is of 8 varieties. The demigods, the forefathers, the asuras or demons, the gandharvas and apsaras or angels, the yakshas and rakshasas, the siddhas, charanas and vidyadharas, the bhutas, pretas and pisachas, and the superhuman beings, celestial singers, etc. All are created by Brahma, the creator of the universe. We'll try to understand a little bit from here. Now, there are inhabitants in the Siddha Loka, they are called Siddhas, where they residents travel in space without vehicles. Now here we can't travel without an aircraft. Of course, the aircraft also is an invention in the last couple of few years. But before that, people had to travel by road. But whereas the inhabitants in the Siddha Loka, which is also mentioned here, they can travel. One of the heavenly planets, they can travel without vehicles. Just by their mere will, it is said they can travel from one planet to another without difficulty. So in the upper planets, it is mentioned that the inhabitants are much more superior to the inhabitants of this planet in all matters of art, culture, and science. So there's a different type of living entity in the upper planets and those in the earthly planet. Their science is different, their culture is different, their art is different. And they possess brains which are far, far superior to those of human beings also. There is a mention about the spirits and jinns here. It is classified as a demigod, but they are not actual demigods like we have who are departed by managers. But the spirits and jinns, we have heard many times about spirits. These spirits and jinns are classified here in this connection because why they are classified among the demigod? Because they can perform uncommon functions which are not possible for common men to perform. Now, demigods, I've explained about Sarga level and they are different from the demigods at the Visarga level. There is also a quote in Srimad Bhagavatam as to how the Lord has created all different planets and the places of inhabitation where living entities are situated in terms of modes of nature and work. And he has created their different kings and rulers also. So this code shows as to how Lord has created so many places for living entities to stay based on their modes of nature in which they are situated and their work. And he has not only created that, He has also created different types of kings and rulers for each of these places. Actually, Srila Prabhupada quotes that how people in the Arabian deserts, they are different from people in the Himalayas. He also mentions about Patalaloka. Many times we have heard that Patalaloka also are full of living entities. These are living beings with greater intelligence, and but because of their hellish mentality, they are given birth in those places. There are also mentioned about places where the sunlight does not reach at all, and the living entities who live there because of their past deeds. So there's a quote by Srila Prabhupada also when he visited London. He mentioned how it was very difficult to see even sunlight. So it was, as a materialistic person, one might be enjoying. For example, if somebody goes to a hill station, he might like to stay in a place like that because of the weather. So, but if one who has a proper understanding of nature, like Srila Prabhupada, he mentioned that it was difficult to see even sunlight in, and there are people, living entities who are to live because of their past deeds. So sometimes, like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, we might develop hatred for sun or sunlight. We might have developed some hatred for heat. Like people who stay in a place like Chennai might have a lot of hatred for heat. So it is possible that if they have that hatred, and they might get a birth in a place where there is no sunlight at all. So this is how the circulation, living entity goes from one form of life to another. There is also a mention in the Shastra as to how mountains, uh, for example, Mount Kailash is the abode of Lord Shiva, is mentioned as to how beautiful it is. It is inhabited by demigods who have mystic powers, and also among human beings there are classifications like Kinnaras and Gandharvas, and then varieties of there also. So it is said that Brahma, after creating demons, created from his own beauty the Gandharvas and Apsaras, which is also mentioned in this lokas. Who are they? We'll understand a little bit of this. These Gandharvas are the musicians in the upper planetary systems. They are not exactly demigods, but between the demigods and human beings. This is mentioned in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the Apsaras are the dancing girls in the upper planetary systems. So these Gandharvas are normally accompanied by their beautiful wives who are known as Apsaras or angels. We might hear from Bible and all angels. So they are all angels. Also some examples like the Lord creates just by glancing. He maintains for some time and he annihilates. Example is given as to how a spider creates its own cobweb by its own energy and later winds up in itself. So, just like a piece of iron moves as per magnetic movement, similarly, the entire creation moves by his energies. So, whatever creation that we see, they are all very, very scientifically made, not just because somebody in the science says, but in the Shastras. From this itself, we can understand how there are so many classifications of living entities, each one with their individualistic qualities, characteristics, etc. And another example is given by Srila Prabhupada that just like a potter gathers a lot of ingredients, then assembles them and makes a pot in different shapes by giving force to the wheel. Similarly, Lord Krishna as the primary creator, he creates, and then Lord Brahma as the secondary creator, he gives shape to different forms of life. Now before we conclude, we'll go to the last sloka, that is text number 30. Then, where here it said, now I shall describe the descendants of the Manus, the creator Brahma, as the incarnation of the passion mode of the personality of Godhead, creates the universal affairs with unfailing desires in every millennium by the force of the Lord's energy. So, the subsequent chapter will describe about the descents of Manu. So, as we have heard before, Manus are descendant, we as human beings are descendants of Manu. Descendants of mankind comes from Manu. So Manus were the earlier rulers, and from there Manu comes the Prajapatis and so forth. So subsequent chapter will describe in detail about them. So that is how Brahma, who is in the mode of passion, creates this universe with living entities who have unfailing desires, and they are forced to take the various forms by the force of the Lord's energy. So this is what I mentioned. And subsequent, descendants from Manu to Prajapatis, the Rishis, and all those things will be described a little later. But the point is that the creation is very, very scientific. It is not any, we have law books, like the demigods also have law books by which they cannot, for example, if somebody deserves his eyesight not to be powerful, they cannot give an eyesight because that is the law of the law by which they go. They cannot transgress the laws like we transgress the laws of nature here. Demigods cannot transgress their laws. So this is how creation is very, very scientific. Now, with this, I conclude the class for the day. I have another about 4 minutes. The next 4 minutes, I can take some questions and comments, because whatever limited I could get from the Shastras regarding various classifications of living entities, I have tried to describe. So whatever I have spoken, if anybody has got questions, comments, they can ask me. Somebody has sent a message, can we get recording? I'm not doing the recording, I'm not in tech savvy, but who is coordinating? You can, we are muted. I
Yes,
don't think I have muted.
I just unmuted everybody now.
I think you can speak to the organizer of this. They'll be able to share the recording with you. Anybody else?
Yes,
Any
you
other
can unmute
questions?
yourself now. Yes, anybody has.
Pardon me?
I said, sorry, just one. Just a second. Yes, Prabhu, I was saying, I was unmuted. I muted everybody. I unmuted everybody now. They can ask questions.
Okay, okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Then
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam. Hare Krishna. Yes, Madhuri. Dandavat Pranam.
You were telling Pandit Ravi Shankar, or which Ravi Shankar, Prabhuji, who said he was who knew about his previous births?
Mozart. Mozart. He was one of the popular musicians of the yesteryears.
Yeah, Mozart and Ravi Shankar also. You said which Ravi Shankar?
Ravi Shankar I mentioned. I also mentioned about John Lennon from the Beatles.
Yeah, which Ravi Shankar?
Ravi Shankar we all have heard of. Carnatic music. No, I'm not much into Carnatic music, but I know I've heard one Ravi Shankar music.
Okay,
this is a quote from Srila Prabhupada's classes.
No, how do we get to know about our past lives? Is it possible?
It is better not to dwell into our past life. What we need to be concerned is about our future. We have come somehow here. We need to see how we can get out of this human form of life and go back to our home, which is a spiritual world. So there are some powerful living entities who can describe. In the yesteryears, astrology used to be very, very powerful. Nowadays, even that is not good because Kali Yuga contamination is there. But as I said, there are many who have predicted the previous life, like Srila Prabhupada also predicted the previous life of some of those who were his associates. Some of them, he said, they are in the spiritual world who have come to assist him. So powerful spiritual personalities can describe, but not everybody. Better not to dwell into the past, better to look into the future. Maybe if we go into the past, we might feel embarrass our own self. Have we lived such a sinful life? So better not to go into it.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mati. Hare Krishna. Yes, Mati. Thank you. Anybody else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Mati. Dandavat Pranam, Mati.
Prabhuji, you were mentioning that trees have consciousness, and they inhibit that naked bodies, like, based on their karma, they get those. So now,
Yes.
when we human beings, consume the fruits of that such trees,
Yes.
is there a possibility? What is the effect of that?
Definitely, fruits are meant to be consumed by humans. Now, at the same time, there is a difference between a fruit that is consumed by a devotee who offers it to the Lord. So the particular tree gets the benefit of being offered to the Lord. At the same time, there might be those who might not do that. That tree might not get that benefit which the other tree would get by when the fruits are offered to the Lord. So definitely spiritual benefits are there when they are used in the right perspective.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you, Mataji. Hare
Prabhuji,
Krishna.
everything belongs to the Lord. So sometimes not most of us, unless we are devotees, we don't offer to the Lord. So does
Yeah.
it mean that but everything belongs to the Lord? We don't need to offer to Him, right?
What is your question? Your question is why should we offer to the Lord?
No. The whole thing is made by Lord and belongs to
Yes.
Lord, and
Yes.
He has definitely made everything pious. So if we
Okay.
consume, He has not made them sinful.
Okay. Now everything belongs to the Lord. If we use anything for our sense gratification, now Lord also explains in Bhagavad Gita, for example, one who eats without offering anything to him is sin. So we see that many times they may be a creation of the Lord itself, but if we use them for our sense gratification, we eat sin. Whereas the same thing when it is offered to that, the two things happen. One is that we get purified by that process. And the second thing is that, just like, for example, a father may be having a big opulence, but when his child takes something from the father and buys something for the father, father becomes happy, isn't it? Similarly, whatever opulence the Lord has given us, if we utilize in the service of the Lord, two things happen. One is the Lord becomes happy that we are not using it for sense gratification, we are using it in use. And the other thing is, by utilizing everything in the service of the Lord, we get purified of our existence. Otherwise, what happens if we go on eating for our own sense gratification? Then we don't have sense control. Ultimately, what happens? We live a life of sense gratification only. So one thing would be the misinterpretation also. For example, if you see TV, now TV, Lord has not given, but somebody wanted to invent a TV. So Lord has given the intelligence to use a TV, but those who are not devotees of the Lord, they may watch so many obscene things in a TV, unwanted things, by which they are trying to satisfy their senses. But the same TV, when devotees use, they utilize it for seeing scriptural subjects. So this is the difference between sense gratification process and utilizing in the service of the Lord. Lord has given that freedom, but it is up to the living entity to use it, whether for sense gratification. The more you use for sense gratification, the more you are bound in this world. So TV
Yes,
is also
we are
made.
not supposed to offer
Yeah,
everything to God, right? God will
yes.
not eat what that we buy from outside.
God will
Like
not. God is full. Ah, yeah. If you buy
if I
from
want
outside,
to eat or if I want to eat a laddu, I cannot
ah,
make it. I don't have the physical health or capacity to make it. But
okay,
doctor has advised me to eat the dry fruit laddu. I just
okay,
offer dry fruit to God and I eat the laddu.
yeah.
I'm
So if
offering
you're
something
offering,
to
yeah,
God, but I'm
if you're
eating
offering,
something
then
different.
question is you're offering to the Lord,
Prabhu
no? So you are buying from
offers.
outside and offering to the.
No, we are not
Yeah.
supposed to buy and offer to God. That is what I was told.
Okay, okay. I'll come to this point. The thing is, as far as possible. Now, I can't know about your age or circumstances. I'm also at a very old age. I also have difficulties in cooking. But what I do is, if I want to have a dry fruit laddu, if I would be in your place, the temple is also sells dry fruit laddus, which the temple cooks. those cooks are all devotees who are in the sattvic mode. They offer it to the Lord, and the temple sells it as prasadam. So if I want to eat a dry fruit laddu, I would buy it from the temple and honor it instead of buying it outside. Now, the degrees of cooking varies in various things. Sometimes, if a situation does not permit, uh, there can be some exemptions, not all the time, everywhere. Dry fruit laddu does not have anything much to cook. But at the same time, if someone is looking at, say, eating something in a restaurant where there's a lot of cooking involved, so one takes the karma of those who are cooking, those who are serving. So many things are, it's a very complex subject. So many things are involved. That is why it is said that as far as possible, don't buy anything outside and cook, because you are taking the karma of others, whereas you want to purify your existence. So if you are able to cook, fine, but there are otherwise options also available. Someone who has got a close vicinity to a temple, they can honor, they can get prasadam from there, which I also do. I don't have facility for to cook, but options are always available. And if one has a desire somehow to keep away, the Lord also gives the intelligence to that particular person as to how can one live without it also. So it all depends on time, place, and circumstances. But to the extent one can avoid taking things from outside, it is better.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna,
Prabhuji.
Thank you, Mati. Thank you, Mati.
Hare Krishna,
Anybody else?
Prabhuji. Yes,
Hare Krishna,
Prabhuji,
Mati.
Hare Krishna. It is said that
Yes, Mati.
Prabhuji, whatever you offer to the Lord, which can
Yes.
be offered, all the
Ah.
contaminations of it is removed because we offer it to the Lord. So why can't
Okay.
we offer the food which we buy from outside? And secondly, Prabhuji, we buy fruits and vegetables also from outside. So we offer the fruit to the Lord. So isn't that also wrong?
One thing is, just because somebody, for example, you say that somebody buys food from outside, what is his karma? Do you know what is his karma? He may be a butcher by profession. We don't know. Why should we take that? Just because he's a butcher and he cooks for you and you offer it, you can't offer it to the Lord. Just because you say that, after all, he is also a human being. But why do you want to take the sinful activities that he performs?
But Prabhuji, they said that
Lots of
when you offer it to the
lots of
Lord,
laws of
the
karma are very complex, very complex. And the more you try to take things from outside, the more you are taking others' karma. You should see how to minimize your karmic reactions, not only as much as possible in this life, and go back free of karma instead of trying to take further karma. So, like I
but
mentioned, if yes, yes.
no, yes, Prabhuji, please, sorry, please continue.
So buying food from outside will take their karma, definitely. There's 6 levels of karma that takes: one who brings, one who cuts, one who cooks, one who serves. So different types of people are involved. So that is why vegetables we may be buying from outside, but then it is only bare minimal karma we take, whoever may be cutting. After all, that is also creation of the Lord. And the Lord says, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam. That means you can offer vegetable, fruit, flower to him, but you cannot offer anything of our own whims and fancies.
What I meant was, Prabhuji, the foods which we can offer. And even in the Gita, the Lord says that whatever action you do, whatever you want to give away, or whatever you offer, do it as an offering to me, and you will be
Yes,
saved from the karma. So,
yes.
Prabhuji, I wanted to know why can't
So why can't we cook of our own and offer to the
cook,
Lord, by which
matlab,
the
why
Lord
can't we
becomes?
offer laddus or sweets or anything from outside, which is pure? That is, it doesn't have any contamination food, and that if we can
See,
offer to the Lord, why?
yeah, certain types of sweets like which are made of milk and sugar, these don't have much of cooking, and it is said that they can be bought from outside and offered to the Lord, but not the deep cooking things like sabji or dal or sambar and rice and roti and all. Other things like sweets, exemptions are there. There's no hard and fast rule. Pure milk sweets can be offered to the Lord. Is it clear, Mataji?
Okay. Okay, Prabhuji. Yes, thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Thanks, Mati. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any other comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Yes, Prabhu. Tell me, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, that Lord Brahma means, and we like a part and parcel of the Lord only. So,
Yes.
and the soul is like Sachidananda, and
Yes. Yes.
so how they are different, Prabhuji? Like the demigods or the living entity, how it will be different in respect to the soul?
Okay. The soul is the same whether it's Brahma or a demigod. But what happens is that when one performs devotional service, human beings are meant to perform devotional service to the Lord by constitutional position. All living entities are meant for that. Now, when one comes to the human form of life, even after performing devotional service, one might not be completely, one might not have completely surrendered so as to come out of the entanglement of this material nature. So this cycle of transmigration continues, so forth and so forth. And those who are not completely perfect in devotional service, Bhagavad Gita also mentions that those who have performed some pious activities, also side by side they have performed some devotional service, they are given birth as demigods, because demigods are situated, they are all devotees of the Lord, but still they have some degree of passion and ignorance in them. So demigods are not pure devotees of the Lord. Pure devotees of the Lord go back to the spiritual world, but those who have performed devotional activities with some desire for results, they also get birth as demigods. And Brahma is the topmost in this material world. Now, Brahma's this thing is also mentioned that if one performs, this as per Karma Kanda is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam itself, that if one performs this Varnashrama system for 100 births, samskaras, all the samskaras as per the Varnashrama system for 100 births, one can get position of Lord Brahma. So Brahma is also a living entity like us, but his intelligence is as close to the personality of Godhead. So Brahma is also a devotee of the Lord, but he serves this as a mission to serve the Lord. He undertakes this seva. At the same time, it is also said that generally Brahma also goes back to the spiritual world. So they are also devotees of the Lord. Sometimes they come with a higher purpose for creation. Sometimes it is an opportunity for them to take the position of Brahma. Like I mentioned, 100 births. If somebody has lived as a Brahmana, 100 births as a Kshatriya, they can get the position of Brahma. So ultimately, Lord gives, somebody has to do this position, creation, take up the position of Brahma. So Lord gives this facility to a living entity to take up that position. Even we can become a demigod, we can become a Brahma also. Just like if you see in a corporate world, you have managers who are CEOs who are highly loyal, highly committed. So some who are not very well committed, some who may be lazy. So depending on their activities and their desire, they get their positions and responsibilities. Brahma also gets his position as a secondary creator, depending upon his desire and activity. Is it clear, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji. Like it is the desire of the individual soul to become a demigod,
Yes.
and like.
If you want to remain here and perform devotional service with that desire also, Lord will fulfill that desire also. Ultimately, one should perform devotional service without any desire, and it should be unmotivated, uninterrupted. That is pure devotional service. And when one comes to reach that stage of pure devotional service, he becomes free from the three modes of material nature, and then he goes back to the spiritual world. So option is available to us what we want to. Whether we want to be a demigod, we want to be Brahma, or we want to go back to the spiritual world.
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments? If not, can I take the class as closed, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Thank you all very much. Granthrachi